Hey, if you're watching this, first of all, thank you. I hope you're having good holidays. My holiday season, this entire fall and winter, has been absolutely horrendous, and van life is to blame. So, van life is supposed to be this awesome thing that kind of frees you, allows you to travel, allows you to see beautiful places, um, and be incredibly mobile and live this dream life of a traveling nomadic person. My experience has been anything but that. I'm experiencing Murphy's Law, where anything that can go wrong will go wrong, and it will go wrong in the worst way. And as I sit here now on December 29th, um, I have a van that is most of the way through a conversion and into a camper van that I've worked on myself, and it is essentially totaled. It's not totaled because of an accident. It's not totaled because of a collision. It's totaled because I was driving down the road one day and suddenly it stopped working right. I've gone from one mechanic to the next, and at this point, I have my van at a dealership, a Ram dealership, that tells me there's nothing that they can do. So I'm posting this video now because I need help, I need advice. And if you are someone that's in van life, maybe you can empathize with what's going on. Or if you're a mechanic, or if you understand how these vehicles work, maybe there's something that you can offer. But quite frankly, I have no options left of how to figure this out. So I'm posting this video online in hopes that someone who knows something somewhere might be able to help me. Now, the way I'm going to break this down is I'm going to first give a 1 minute synopsis scenario of what's going on just to scratch the surface. And if you're someone that really wants to understand everything that's going on or has the time or maybe has some advice for me, if you know everything that's going on, then you can continue watching and watch the longer version where I'm going to go through every single step that has happened in this crazy scenario, in hopes that maybe I can find some sort of resolution or solution to what's going on. So let me start with the beginning, a simple 1 minute synopsis. I have a 2016 Ram Promaster high top van. It's a 2500. I purchased it when it had about 83,000 miles. I was halfway through a conversion, and after just a couple of months of owning the van, at around 88,000 miles, I'm driving down the road and suddenly it seems like it slips out of gear. It goes from third gear into neutral. Um, it doesn't say neutral on the dash, it just doesn't go anywhere, and the engine revs up when I press the gas. So I pull off the road. It seems like I'm having some transmission trouble. From that point on, I can't really get the van to engage and actually drive forward. It just is in neutral no matter what I do. I take it somewhere, I have the transmission replaced. I pay a lot of money. They give me the van back a month later, and the same thing happens within a couple of days. The same problem occurs. So I give it back to that shop and they say, well, we fixed the transmission. It seems like there's something else going on and we don't know what it is. Take it to a dealer. I get the van to a dealer. The dealer says the transmission is bad. So I have the previous mechanic and the current dealer talk to each other. And then the dealer calls me and says, well, if it's not the transmission, we noticed these four other electrical components that seem to have water damage. You would need to replace all four of these parts in order for us to continue diagnosing the problem. However, none of these parts are available. All of these parts are on back order with no estimated time of arrival, and we will not service this vehicle for you. So my current status is I have a vehicle that doesn't work. Everything about it works except for the fact that it won't get into gear. And I have a dealership that tells me it needs a whole bunch of parts. There's all kinds of water damage that just happened out of nowhere. There are no way that we can get the parts. There's no way for us to service your vehicle. We need you to get this vehicle off of our lot. They told me they need it removed in 3 days. So I have this van. I live in the van. The van is my home. It's my vehicle for mobility. It's everything. I've invested months of time and tens of thousands of dollars into building it and working on it. It's been sitting at a dealership now for over a month. and I have no resolution. So I don't know what to do. Every mechanic that I go to tells me I need to go to a dealer, given the diagnosis of the problems. And when I get it to a dealer, they say we can't get these parts and your van is totaled. But it wasn't in a collision, so I don't believe insurance is going to cover the cost of it. So what I have is $40,000 vehicle and more now that I've put other work into it. And now I've put in almost 8,000 additional dollars into transmission repair that didn't solve the problem. And now after all of this, I have it at a dealership who tells me there's nothing that they can do. So that's the short version. The long version includes just one thing after another going wrong and going wrong and going wrong. But I want to present the case in its entirety because I have faith that there's somebody out there that could point me in a direction. And if you are a van lifer, I'm sure that you can empathize with this. Hopefully you've never experienced and never will experience anything like this because it is miserable. However, being out of your home and away from your car and being totally displaced from the lifestyle that you've created for now going on 3 months, putting tens of thousands into repairs that aren't working, and then to have a van that's totaled that you've put your blood, sweat, and tears into. Maybe I'll get some empathy out of this video, but what I'm really looking for is some advice, some support, some help, and maybe even a mechanically inclined person to offer me suggestions about what they would do. Okay, so enough with the pity party. I'm now going to take you on a journey to explain every single detail of this entire scenario, how it has unfolded, what has happened, the communication between me and different mechanics, the phone calls I've made, in hopes of maybe finding somebody out there that watches this whole thing and says, I know what you need to do. So let's get started. Let's dive in. And if you are someone who's actually going to watch this, just know I appreciate you so much because I don't know what else to do. Okay, July 12th this year, I purchased the van. It's got 83,000 miles. I didn't know this at the time, but it was formerly a FedEx vehicle. An inspection is done before I purchase the vehicle. It's a very basic preliminary inspection where it's driven a mile or two and there's nothing serious that comes up in this inspection. I do note a couple of things when I buy it. One, the odometer is flashing. And I imagine that just needs to be reset or something like that. I noticed that the brake light warning, there's a icon on the dash for a brake light warning, and there's also a tire pressure monitoring system light, which I imagine is just because the tires are low, and that's what the salesman tells me. And I noticed that there's no cover on the fuse box in the engine bay. Which I thought was a little bit peculiar. However, there were a couple wires coming out of it that led to components in the cab, and I recognize that this is because it's a FedEx vehicle and it has extra components. I took those components out. Basically, when I purchased the vehicle, as soon as I purchased it, I took them out. I also purchased an extended warranty for $2,250. Now, in August, at around 84,000 miles, I fill up the tires, I replace the lights, and the warning lights go off. However, both of them come back on relatively shortly. So I start to wonder, there's obviously some sort of problem here because it's telling me that my lights are out even though they're not. And it's telling me that my tires are low even though they're not. And those lights never go away. So that's the first thing I think is pretty weird. And I decide I'm going to take it into a shop just to see what's going on. So on September 29th, at 88,000 miles, I've put 5,000 miles on the van so far. I take it to an AMCO in Central California. And they run some codes, and I'm going to put the codes up on the screen. They find these codes. They suggest replacing the body control module because of these codes. And then there's a couple of other things that they recommend. However, they're not able to help me. They say that they can't get the parts that they would need, and there's nothing dire happening, so I just drive off, and nothing is really done at that time. On October 21st at 89,761 miles, my van breaks down while I'm driving. I'm driving down the road at 25 miles an hour roughly, and suddenly my foot is on the gas and it just revs up extremely high, and it's like the van is suddenly in neutral out of nowhere. And when I press the gas, it just revs up without going anywhere. So I pull off to the side of the road and I kind of play with it for a second, seeing if I just turn the car off and get it back into drive, if I can get it. And what I find is that it's hit or miss with whether or not the car will go into gear when it says it is. So I can kind of lunge forward. Sometimes I can get 5 or 10 feet. Sometimes I can get 50 feet. But at some point it slips out of gear again and I can't drive it. So I have it towed to a shop. At that shop, he does a scan and he finds 4 codes. Now, all 4 of these codes are different than the codes that were previously found a month ago. I don't know how or why, but these are the codes that are listed. That shop does not have the capacity to deal with this problem. And they're full. It was just the closest shop I could get to. So I call around and I find a shop that is willing to take the van. It's very difficult for me to find a shop that will take a Promaster because of the size and weight of the van. People don't have lifts to work on it. Even though I'm in Seattle, a huge city, I have a really hard time finding a shop that will take it in to work on what appears to be a transmission problem. I'm able to find an AAMCO that will take it in. So I have the van towed. So this is now my second tow. I take it to AAMCO. And after a few days, AAMCO tells me you need a new transmission. Your transmission is bad. They offer me a couple of different options, and ultimately, the total cost is estimated to be around $7,000. The warranty company pays for a portion of this. They approve it and pay for a portion of this transmission. So out of pocket, like roughly $2,000 to $3,000. That process takes a long time. Dealing with the warranty company, I'm away from my van. At this point, I've been away from my van for a month, over a month by the time I get the van back. So it's now been over a month since this initial problem happened, but it seems like everything is going to move forward. I have paid $8,326 total. $4,326 out of pocket and the other 4 from the warranty company, but AAMCO releases the van back to me and they say that it's fixed. So something weird that becomes relevant later on happens. When I'm getting the van back from them, one of the mechanics tells me he noticed that there's no cover on the fuse box. And I said, yeah, there hasn't been since I bought it. I've had no cover on the fuse box. I imagine FedEx took it off because they added components. I'm not quite sure, but there hasn't been a cover on the fuse box as long as I've owned it. And it makes him feel better to tape a piece of plastic over it at that time. And so he does that. He just puts he literally covers the fuse box with a sheet of plastic. And I don't really think anything of this because it hasn't been covered the whole time. However, it's not wet. There's no water in this area, no visible water that I can see. He just notices that it is uncovered, so he covers it. I say thank you. I drive it away. Now, AAMCO had told me that when you get a new transmission, sometimes it'll shift funky for a couple of days because it's learning the new transmission. And that same day, within a couple of miles of leaving AAMCO, I noticed a weird shift. What happened was I'm going up a slight slope and the van keeps revving up higher and higher without upshifting. So it's like it's stuck in third gear. And it's like 4,000 RPM, 5,000 RPM. I'm waiting for it to downshift or to upshift and lower the RPMs. But it doesn't. It just stays really high. And I thought that's weird. Why is it doing that? I would expect it to be shifting. Like, I'm familiar with how this van operates and it should be shifting, but it didn't. But I play that off as it's a weird shifting thing. 2 days later, I've only put about 10 miles on the van since taking it from AMCO. The same initial problem happens again. The vehicle slips out of gear at a low speed. I can't get it back into drive, and I pull off the road. And at this point, I take this video that I'll put on the screen. In this video, I notice that it will sometimes get into gear for a moment, and other times it won't. Now, I know when it will operate correctly and when it won't, because if I try to put the shifter into the manual mode, normally the plus and minus sign will light up, as if the van is recognizing I put it into manual mode. However, when I do that right now, you'll see that those lights don't appear. And then I know that no matter what I do, the van's not in gear. It will not get into gear. However, if those lights come on, the van will start to roll forward. And it might roll forward for 50 feet before it falls out of gear again. So I noticed that. I take video so you can kind of look and see what is going on. So I call AMCO and I tell them what's going on, and they tow the van back to AMCO. So this is now my third time towing the van. I get it towed back to AMCO, who just replaced the transmission. Now, AMCO keeps it for a couple of days, and then they tell me the problem doesn't seem to be the transmission anymore. The transmission is fine. There's some other problems that are happening. And he says, we can't fix it here. We don't have the tools or the capability to diagnose these problems. We don't know what's going on. He says, we fixed your transmission for you. There's something else happening. Here's your van back. It still doesn't work. Okay, so at that point, I take a mechanic friend of mine to where my van is sitting on the side of the road near the AMCO, and I have him run a scan of the codes. And so these are the codes, I'm going to put them on the screen, that are now occurring. And you'll notice that these are all, the majority of them are new codes. They weren't happening before, and now they are happening. They're different codes. Same problem, the transmission shifting issue is still happening, but they're different codes now. So I find a dealer that has an appointment, and I tow the van to the dealer. This is the fourth time I've towed the van. It is now December 10th. I've been dealing with this going on 2 months. The dealer calls me after their initial inspection, and this is a Ram dealer, right? Like, this is the place that I'm now taking the van to because nobody else will help. In the midst of all this, I have talked to tons of other shops. I've been making call after call, and when I explain what is happening, most of them say go to the dealer. So now I got it at the dealer. I've towed it 4 times. It's been 2 months that I've been living at work to fix this. The dealer says we need to do a transmission teardown because the problem appears to be in your transmission. He says it's going to cost $1,800. And I tell the dealer, go ahead and do that. AMCO is going to pay for this because I just spent nearly $9,000 on this transmission. So they say, okay. Now I call AMCO and I tell them, the dealer says your transmission is bad. They're going to go into your transmission and I'm going to bill you for everything that they do. AMCO says, I'm going to talk to the dealer. The problem is not our transmission. So then I get a call back from the dealer several days later. By the way, I cannot communicate with this dealer. They do not answer their phone. They do not call me back. They do not respond to emails. I leave voicemail after voicemail. They do not respond to me. I have zero luck communicating with them until they finally decide at these random intervals to communicate with me, which just adds frustration to the entire thing. I can't get a hold of the people that have my van. However, when he finally does get back to me, he says, yeah, we talked to AMCO and we're going to do a diagnosis of your electrical system. I say, okay, go for it. Again, 2 days go by. I cannot get a hold of them. They don't answer the phone. They don't email me back. So now I'm contacting the service supervisor. And I'm like, yo, your service advisor is not contacting me. The service supervisor doesn't get back to me. So I'm getting more and more frustrated with this situation. So I finally get a hold of the dealer, and the dealer says that there's all kinds of electrical problems. And he's mad. The service supervisor is mad at me. And he's like, there's wires coming out of your power distribution center, the fuse block in the engine compartment. There's wires coming out of your PDC. There's water damage to your PDC. Your BCM isn't responding. Your harness, your power distribution harness is destroyed. Your shifter module isn't responding. He tells me that there's all kinds of these different problems, and he tells me it's all because of water damage. He says that there's extensive water damage to my power distribution center, and that's what's causing all of these problems. And now all these different parts are fried because of water damage. Now, mind you, I've been driving this van for 5,000 miles as it is. I never had any water issues. I never had any water leakage. I never noticed any water getting into the engine bay. And while I recognized that the power distribution center was not covered, the hood was closed and no water was getting in there. For the entirety of the time that I owned it, I worked on it through rainstorms. I drove it through thunderstorms. I mean, this van has been in inclement weather over the course of the past 5,000 miles and 6 months with no issues whatsoever. After this transmission issue, which arose out of nowhere, suddenly I have all these water damage problems. Where did all of this water come from, and how did this happen? The dealer tells me all of these parts are problematic. They all need to be replaced, not just one. He can't figure out which one needs to be replaced first. He says all of them need to be replaced. He also tells me all of these parts are on back order with no ETA, and he has his doubts that these parts will ever come, and he can't work on the van. This is the service supervisor at the dealer. He says, there's nothing that we can do for you, and get your van away from us. And at this point, I'm extremely frustrated, so I'm kind of on edge with them about what they're telling me. I'm like, dude, you think you're telling me my van is totaled? And he basically agrees with me. He says that there's nothing the dealer can do. These parts are never going to come. And he tells me I have a deadline to remove the van from the dealer. So I reach out to corporate. I reach out to their corporate email address and I say, what the hell is going on? I've got this van. Out of nowhere, it stopped working, and your dealership can't fix it. It's not even about money. They never give me a quote. They say they can't do it. First, they said it was the transmission. Now they're saying it's all these electrical issues. So they after talking to corporate, they send me a report that includes some photos. It shows that there's water droplets on the fuse box. I don't know how that water got there. And in the report, it says there is a wet towel on the power distribution center. I never put a wet towel on the power distribution center. The only thing I ever put on there was that piece of plastic when I left AMCO the first time. Somewhere between having a dry engine compartment and when I got the vehicle back from AMCO and they said it was fixed, to returning it to AMCO and then getting it to the dealer, somehow it got soaking wet in there and there's a towel sitting on top of it. And, I mean, it was at AMCO. That's the only thing that I can think. But the problem is the same as it was before. So now I'm just left here with a lot of questions. Did I ever need a new transmission? How did water get into all of these different parts? Was the problem initially these electronic components, or was the problem the transmission? And what's the problem now? Has it changed? Where do I take this van if the dealership won't work on it? Should I just source these parts on my own, used from eBay? What part should I start with? I don't know if it's the transmission or if it's an electrical component. I don't know if I need to replace the power distribution center, the body control module, the power distribution harness, the shifter module. I don't have the tools to really diagnose which one of these things is the problem. And I just don't know what to do right now. There's so many questions. And I don't have anybody that is willing to try and help. I mean, maybe if I just dry out all these parts, I don't know how the water damage happened, but if I just dry out all these parts, then will they work again? If I get these parts used and somehow install them through a third-party mechanic, will they then need to get programmed from the dealer? Are any of these problems that they're saying even the actual fault of the issue? I mean, maybe it's something even more than any of these problems. If the dealer won't look at it, what the hell do I do? You know? So I'm going to provide all the information. If you've watched this video all the way through, thank you so much. If you have any advice or suggestions, comment below. I just really need some help. I don't know what to do. I really don't know what to do. So yeah, thank you, and I hope you have a good new year, and I hope that nothing like this ever happens to anybody else that is trying to experience van life. It's not fun. Anyways, take care. Thank you.